Welcome back. Today we're reading Chapter 16 of Robert Anton Wilson's Prometheus Rising. Chapter 16, The SNAFU Principle. The peculiar nature of the game makes it impossible for participants to stop the game once it's underway. Such situations we label games without end. Watzlawick, Bevan, Jackson, Pragmatics of Human Communication. Communication is only possible between equals. Dominance, heteronormal. Heteromoral? I'm in charge around this habitat. I'm moral, he's immoral. Submission, sklavmoral. This is Second Circuit neuropolitics. They shall come to know God. James Joyce, Finnegan's Wake. Mammalian social biology, rooted in the antique neurocircuits of the old brain, contains many factors opposing the evolution of domesticated primates into true freedom and objective intelligence. The chief of these reactionary factors is described in my novel Illuminatus as the SNAFU Principle, or Celine's Law. It holds that communication is only possible between equals. This was an oversimplification for fictional satirical purposes. More precisely, the proposed law would read, adequate communication flows freely between equals. Communication between non-equals is warped and distorted by Second Circuit domination and submission rituals, perpetuating communication jam and a game without end. Political power is as a typical alpha male once said, grows out of the barrel of a gun. This is metaphorically as well as literally true. The gun may be symbolic and fairly abstract, consisting of virtualized social expectations, don't talk back to your father, or concrete and nonviolent but deadly way. In other words, the capacity to remove biosurvival necessities by cutting off the ticket supply in a capitalist society. One more word and I'll fire you, Bumstead. Under the Second Circuit socio-biological rules, everybody tends to lie a little to flatter or evade displeasure when exchanging signals with those above them in the pack hierarchy. Every authoritarian structure can be visualized as a pyramid with an eye on the top. This is the typical flow chart of any government, any corporation, any army, any bureaucracy, any mammalian pack. On each rung, participants bear a burden of nescience in relation to those above them. That is, they must be very, very careful that the natural sensory activities of being conscious organisms, the acts of seeing, hearing, smelling, drawing, inferences from perception, etc., are in accord with the reality tunnel of those above them. This is absolutely vital. Pack status and job security depends on it. It is much less important, a luxury that can easily be discarded, that those perceptions be in accord with objective fact. For instance, in the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover, the agent had to develop a capacity to see godless communists everywhere. Any agent whose perceptions indicated that there were actually very few godless communists in the country at the time would experience cognitive dissonance. His or her reality tunnel was at variance with the official reality tunnel of the pyramid. To talk about such perceptions at all would be to invite suspicions of eccentricity, intellectual wiseacring, or of being oneself a godless communist. The same would apply to a Dominican inquisitor in the Middle Ages who lacked the capacity to see witches everywhere. In such authoritarian situations, it is important to see what the top dogs, alpha males, see. It is inconvenient and possibly dangerous to see what is objectively happening. But this leads to an equal and opposite burden of omniscience upon those at the top in the eye of the pyramid. All that is forbidden to those at the bottom, the conscious activities of perception and evaluation, is demanded of the power elite, the master class. They must attempt to do the seeing, hearing, smelling, etc., and all the thinking and evaluating for the whole pyramid. But a man with a gun, the power to punish, is told only what the target thinks will not cause him to pull the trigger. Is only told what the target thinks will not cause him. Okay. Write the pink slip, order the court-martial. The elite, with their burden of omniscience, face the underlings with their burden of nescience, and receive only the feedback consistent with their own preconceived notions and reality tunnels. The burden of omniscience becomes over time another and more complex burden of nescience. Nobody really knows anything anymore, or if they do, they are careful to hide the fact. The burden of nescience becomes omnipresent. More and more sensory experience becomes unspeakable. As Paul Watzlawick notes, that which is objectively repressed, unspeakable, soon becomes subjectively repressed, unthinkable. Nobody likes to feel like a coward and liar constantly. It is easier to cease to notice where the official reality tunnel differs from existential fact. Thus, SNAFU accelerates and rigiditas bureaucratus sets in, the last stage before all brain activity ceases and the pyramid is clinically dead as an intellectual entity. We also propose that national security is another semantic spook, an Empedoclean knot, that the search for national security is the chief cause of national insecurity and a potent anti-intellectual mechanism. As Leary writes, secrecy is the original sin, big leaf in the Garden of Eden, the basic crime against love. The purpose of life is to receive synthesis and transmit energy. Communication fusion is the goal of life. Any star can tell you that. Communication is love. Secrecy, withholding the signal, hoarding, hiding, covering up the light, is motivated by shame and fear. As so often happens, the right wing is half right for the wrong reasons. They say primly, if you have done nothing wrong, you have no fear of being bugged. That's the opposite these days. Exactly. But the logic goes both ways. Then FBI files, CIA dossiers, White House conversations should be open to all. Let everything hang open. Let government be totally visible. The very last people to hide their actions should be the police and the government. What my eminent colleague states so poetically can be stated more functionally as follows. Every secret police agency must be monitored by an elite corps or secret police of the second order. This is because infiltration of the secret police for purposes of subversion will always be a prime goal of both internal subversives and hostile foreign powers. And B, secret police agencies acquire fantastic capacities to blackmail and intimidate others in and out of government. Stalin executed 3 chiefs of the secret police in a row because of this danger. As Nixon so wistfully said in a Watergate transcript, well, Hoover performed. He would have fought. That was the point. He would have defied a few people. He would have scared them to death. He had a file on everybody. Alex added. Thus, those who employ secret police agencies must monitor them to be sure they are not acquiring too much power. Here, a sinister infinite regress enters the game. Any elite second-order police must also be subject to infiltration or to acquiring too much power in the opinion of its masters, and so it too must be monitored by a secret police of the third order. In brief, once a government has N orders of secret police spying on each other, all are potentially suspect, and to be safe, a secret police of order N+1 must be created, and so on forever. In practice, of course, this cannot regress to mathematical infinity, but only to the point where every citizen is spying on every other citizen or until the funding runs out. National security in practice must always fall short of the logical Empedoclean infinite regress it requires for perfect security in that gap between the ideal of one nation under surveillance with wiretaps and urine tests for all, and the strictly limited real situation of finite resources and finite funding. There is simple encouragement for paranoias of all sorts to flourish, both among the citizens and among the police. And then you have all sitting on top of a pyramid saying, I wonder what's going on behind my back. I need more cups. The burden of omniscience, or why you can't reach the court or castle in Kafka's allegories. Thus, USSR, after 62 years of Marxist secret police games, reached a point where the alpha males were terrified of painters and poets. In spying and hiding transactions, worry leads to more worry, and suspicion leads to more suspicion. The very act of participating, however unwillingly, in the secret police game, even as victim or citizen being monitored, will eventually produce all the classic symptoms of clinical paranoia. The agent knows who he is spying on, but he never knows who is spying on him. Could it be his wife, his mistress, his secretary, the newsboy, the good humor man? If there is a secret police at all in any nation, every branch and department of government and institutions which are not even admitted to be parts of governments become suspect in the eves of cautious and intelligent people, as a possible front for or tunnel to the secret police. That is, the more shrewd will recognize that something bearing the label of HEW, HEW, or even International Silicon and Pencil might actually be the CIA or NSA in disguise. In such a deception network, conspiracy theories proliferate. Rumor is necessary. It has been found when people cannot find official news sources that can be trusted to tell them what is really going on. The present author, having worked in the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, the legalized pot movement, and other dissident causes, has repeatedly been approached by Friend A with dire warnings that Friend B is almost certainly a secret police agent, only to be told later and independently by Friend C that Friend A is a secret police agent. It requires delicate neurological know-how to keep one's sense of humor in the secret police matrix. The more omnipresent the secret police, the more likely it is that intelligent men and women will regard the government with fear and loathing. The government, on discovering that growing numbers of citizens will regard it with fear and loathing, will increase the size and powers of the secret police to protect itself. The infinite regress again appears. And then we got a comment, suspicion leads to more suspicion. The only alternative was suggested sarcastically by playwright Bertolt Brecht, who was hounded by U.S. secret police as a communist and by East German secret police later as not sufficiently communist. If the government doesn't trust the people, Brecht asked innocently, why doesn't it dissolve them and elect new people? No way has yet been invented to elect a new people, so the government will instead spy on the existing people with increased vigor. Every secret police organization is engaged in both collection of information and the production of misinformation, euphemistically called disinformation. That is, you score points in the secret police game by both by hoarding signals, information units, hiding factional competitors, and by foisting false signals, fake information units, on the other players. This creates the situation I will call optimum SNAFU, in which every player has rational, not neurotic, reasons for suspecting that each and all may be trying to deceive him, gull him, con him, dupe him, and generally misinform him. As Henry Kissinger, speaking of the devil, is alleged to have said, anybody in Washington who isn't paranoid must be crazy. Maybe the UFOs really exist objectively, or maybe the whole UFO phenomenon is a cover for secret police disinformation ploy. Maybe there are black holes where space and time implode, or maybe black holes were invented to befuddle Russian scientists and send them into little man who wasn't there semantic spookery. Maybe Jimmy Carter really exists, or maybe he is, as National Lampoon once claimed, an actor named Sidney Goldfarb trained to project an attractive down-home image. Perhaps only 3 alpha males at the top of the national security pyramid really know the answers to these questions, or perhaps these 3 are being deceived by certain subordinates, as Lyndon Johnson was deceived about Vietnam by the CIA. Such is the neurosociological logic of disinformation matrix. It is, as Paul Watzlawick, did I say that correctly this time? Has demonstrated, the logic of schizophrenia. Less than 10 years after the secret police game was established, whereby the National Security Act of 1948, the books of Dr. Wilhelm Reich were burned in New York in a New York incinerator by government order. This was a shocking sight to some of us who remembered that we had recently fought a long war against Nazi Germany for, among other things, their crime against civilization of burning books. Shortly thereafter, Dr. William Ivey, former head of the department at Chicago Medical School, was subjected to 10 years of legal harassment for espousing radical cancer cure. More recently, Dr. Timothy Leary was sentenced to 38 years imprisonment for espousing controversial ideas about neurotransmitter chemicals and re-imprinting the nervous system. There is a war on against holistic physicians. It does not matter whether any or all of these heretics were right or wrong. Scientific truth is only determined after a generation or more of research. It is not determined by throwing the dissenters in prison or burning their books. The point is that the secret police game immediately creates the social context for a return to the mechanisms of the Holy Inquisition. The intelligence of the whole society, the communication network through which information is received, decoded, and transmitted, is the first casualty. I feel great, and I send fraternal greetings to Dr. Andrei Sakharov in Russia, said Dr. Leary on emerging from prison, registering the fact that the mechanisms of the prison state are the same everywhere, as are the myths that protect them. Good Russians believed Dr. Sakharov was a half-crazed alcoholic, just as good Americans believed Dr. Leary was a half-crazed dope fiend. I once proposed in a magazine article that the UFO is caused by some unusual electromagnetic or gravitational field fluctuating, and that this geophysical anomaly creates A, real energy disturbances, jumping furniture, electrical failures, ball lightning, making odd lights in the sky, etc., and B, disturbances in the brain functioning of animals and humans in the affected area, causing the well-documented animal panics and the rather obvious human hallucinations occurring in such areas. Statistical support for this theory will be found in Persinger and Lanfreniere, who have run computer analysis of common patterns in 1,242 UFO cases and 4,818 other abnormal reports, poltergeist, teleportations, miracles, and mysteries of all sorts. The data demonstrates that both UFOs and other energy anomalies tend to cluster along earthquake faults, with some peaking before earthquakes. Persinger and Lanfreniere also suggested that the geophysical forces at work create both real oddities, jumping furniture, etc., and hallucinations. So that is a job of nice and exquisite discrimination to an attempt to find out what is really going on. It has also been proposed by the learned Dr. Jacques Vallée, astronomer, cyberneticist, and physicist, that the UFO phenomenon is being created by a secret police agency as an elaborate cover for a complex disinformation system. A combined Wilson-Persinger-Lafreniere-Vallée theory, probably fitting more of the data than the separate theories, would suggest that the UFO phenomenon is the synergetic product of some geophysical oddity which created weird energy fluctuations and brain change experiences in humans on the scene, and is being manipulated after the fact by one or more intelligence agencies, or by groups even more esoteric. Consider this scenario. Something weird happens. Assume that it is the geophysical abnormality and brain change trauma we posit, but grant also that it might be the alien spaceship beloved by folk myth. The following events are equally likely, whatever the weirdity really was. As soon as the witness starts talking, all interested parties converge in the area. Intelligence agent Mo comes to conceal evidence that it might have been a spaceship. That is the policy of his agencies for their own reasons. Intelligence agent Joe also arrives to plant evidence that it was a spaceship. That is the policy of his agency, since they are doing just what Dr. Vallée suspects. The British Double-Cross Bureau in World War II engaged in equally complex and absurd dramas, seemingly totally unrelated to their actual work, but serving as disinformation screens for that work. Philip Klass and other skeptics arrive too, trying to reduce everything to hallucination, even if eyes are burned, cars wrecked, etc. The space freaks, who may or may not be infiltrated by associates of intelligence agent Joe, are soon there too to get facts to fit their benign Space Brothers reality tunnel. Various occultists are there too to fit it into their own mythos of angelology, demonology, etc. What we are saying is that every conspiracy regards itself as an affinity group, men and women who share the same goals and work together well. When you and I do it, it is just an affinity group. When that gang over there does it, it is a damnable conspiracy. True conspiracy does exist when a group conceals evidence, spreads deliberate misinformation, and coerces or terrorizes witnesses. Any affinity group approaches such behavior to the extent that members reinforce each other's participation in the group reality tunnel, especially concerning such crucial epistemological matters as what is important enough to notice and discuss as against what is trivial and better ignored. How coercive do we have to be to intimidate witnesses? Most people, as our SNAFU principle explains, are easily led to reporting what an authority figure wants to hear. But let us consider the UFO syndrome further as illustrating the whole spectrum of brain change and brain programming. UFO contactees frequently show positive neurosomatic turn-on, the bliss out experience. Some even become faith healers or leaders of occultist groups. Others show a negative neurosomatic effects. Light is unbearable, as in schizophrenia, anxiety attacks, may require hospitalization, etc. Metaprogramming consciousness, the ability to choose between alternative reality tunnels, is also reported in crude metaphors about parallel universes, other realities, occultist jargon. Neurogenetic, Jungian, collective unconscious visions are common, ranging from demons, hairy dwarves, etc., to the space goddess or lady of the stars of ancient and Catholic iconography. Even metaphysiological quantum level experience is reported in the UFO literature, ranging from space-time trans-time trips to out-of-body experience to seeming or alleged teleportations. Excuse me. It may be emphasized most strongly that both positive and negative visions on all these circuits are common in ufology. Ufology, my bad. It seems that if the programmers mean us well, they are accidentally doing ill to many, and if they mean us ill, as Dr. Valet thinks, they are accidentally doing well to some of us. But this is true of all brain change technology. All memes are psyops. It seems that Valet's monistic conspiracy theory is inadequate, as monistic conspiracy theories are inadequate in politics. It is more likely that the UFO experience, like the other brain change experiences we have studied, are sometimes spontaneous and sometimes programmed, and that there are rival gangs of programmers with radically different goals in mind for humanity. When Dr. Leary and I first published our neurological analysis of the Patty Hearst case in OUI magazine, the editors introduced it with a dramatic headline: "The fight for Patty Hearst's mind is the overture to a worldwide battle for control of consciousness." Not quite. The Hearst case would more appropriately be considered a bar near the end of the second movement of the Mind War Symphony. The first movement was the primitive neuroscience of ancient and medieval tyrants who acquired a great deal of pragmatic know-how about the effects of isolation, terror, and intimidation, and of shamans and occultists who learned how neurochemicals can alter perceived reality tunnels. The second movement began with modern psychology, with Freud, Pavlov, Jung, Skinner, etc., climaxing with the LSD revolution and the discovery by millions that reality tunnels could be radically mutated temporarily and sometimes permanently by neurochemistry. The third movement is the growingly obvious warfare between those who would program all of us and those who wish to become our own meta-programmers. Exercises. Number 1. Start collecting evidence that your phone is bugged. Number 2. Everybody gets a letter occasionally that is lightly damaged. Assume that somebody is opening your mail and clumsily resealing it. Number 3. Look around for evidence that your coworkers or neighbors think you're a bit queer and are planning to have you committed to a mental hospital. Number 4. Try living a whole week with the program "Everybody likes me and tries to help me achieve all of my goals." Number 5. Try living a whole month with the program "I have chosen to be aware of this particular reality." 6. Try living a whole day with the program "I am God being a human being. I created every reality I notice." Assume that God is the answer to what defeated John's question: "Who is the one who is living you now?" Number 7. Try living forever with the meta program "Everything works out more perfectly than I plan it." And this has been Chapter 16 of Prometheus Rising. This has been Taio. See you next time.